Well, welcome everyone. We are going to get started in a few minutes, just one more minute to let some stragglers join this conversation. So please sit tight. We will be starting shortly. Thank you.
Y para aquellos de ustedes que nos están escuchando, vamos a esperar unos minutitos para darle tiempo a la gente que de pronto esté llegando un poquito tarde para que nos acompañen. Gracias.
Well, let's get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining tonight's presentation hosted by the City and County of Denver. My name is Vanita Curry, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight as we talk about the East 12th Avenue corridor. I'd like to welcome our Spanish interpreter to welcome our Spanish speakers. Nora.
Buenas noches a todos y bienvenidos a esta reunión comunitaria para que hablemos acerca de la ciclovía de la Avenida 12 del Este. Para aquellos de ustedes que quieran escuchar esta reunión en su idioma, por favor, pulsen el icono del globo en la parte inferior de la pantalla, lo van a ver. Una vez que pulsen esto, por favor, seleccionen el idioma español para poder escuchar esta reunión en español. Gracias.
Thank you, Nora. Before we move further, I'd like us to take a moment to honor our fellow Coloradans who lost their lives yesterday, and for those who are struggling with the aftermath of that moment, if we could just take one moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking that moment with us. Let me tell you a bit about how to provide feedback during our time together. All participants will be placed on mute during our presentation, but we will stop to listen to your questions. To ask your question, just type it into the chat box. Your question will be forwarded to our program team to answer during our Q&A breaks. We like to make this a safe place for everyone to ask questions and share their thoughts. Please remember to be kind and respectful of others and to kindly ask your questions and share your thoughts. I am joined by several transportation experts from the City and County of Denver, including Ellen Forhofer, Bryce Hamilton, and Dana Hoffman. They are all from the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. My colleague, Kaylee Showers, is also working behind the scenes to ensure this presentation is successful tonight. Let's take a look at the meeting agenda. We have divided our meeting into 4 big buckets of information. First, we want to give a little history about why East 12th Avenue was selected for improvements. Then we'll talk about what is a neighborhood bikeway. We'll pause to take your questions before we give you project updates and timelines. We'll stop for more questions and a quick poll before we end with ways to ensure you know how to stay engaged. I'd like to hand things off to Ellen to begin our presentation. Ellen.
Thank you, Vanita. And thanks to everyone for making time tonight to join us at this meeting. We'll be talking about East 12th Avenue and the proposed neighborhood bikeway for that corridor, but wanted to begin by speaking about the bond program. This is a bond-funded project, which means it was part of the program that was approved by voters in 2017 and includes $18 million towards the design and construction of 50 miles of high comfort bikeways citywide. Neighborhood bikeways are a type of high comfort bikeway, and all of these corridors were selected from phases 1 and 2 of the Denver Moves Bicycles plan. So that's a little bit of background about the funding source for this project. And on the next slide, I wanted to highlight the several different ways that improvements are built. So as we just mentioned, bond funding is one funding opportunity to see projects implemented. But we also have a paving coordination project that links bikeways with our paving schedule across the city. We also have a signal program that looks at signal upgrades, improved timing, as well as new signals and improved crossings. We have a Safe Routes to School program, a sidewalk gap program, maintenance programs, as well as our bike program, which receives additional funding. So just wanted to highlight that there are several different ways projects get built. This is a bond funded project. And on the next slide, we'll talk about the corridor itself. So we are looking at East 12th Avenue from Madison Street to Yosemite Street. So stretching across a long east-west connection across a big part of Denver. This was a corridor that was identified in Denver Moves Bicycles, and then also talked about primarily in the East Area Plan for this part of the corridor, but west of Colorado Boulevard, also talked about in the East Central Area Plan. There was also a feasibility study conducted in 2015, which we'll talk about a little bit later. As I mentioned, this was funded in the bond program in 2017, and it adds 6.7 lane miles to the bike network, striping out a very important east-west connection for neighborhoods, businesses, and linking into Aurora's bicycle network as well. This project will also improve crossings and safety at busy intersections. A few of those are listed here: Colorado, Monaco, Syracuse, and Quebec. On the next slide, just wanted to again highlight that we have talked about this project in the community before, and this effort now to implement the project is building upon those conversations, bringing feedback that we heard from both the feasibility study in 2015 and the East and East Central area plans over the past few years, bringing that feedback that we heard about 12th Avenue as a bike priority corridor, and also adding additional feedback from this process as we begin to develop a concept design for this corridor. So I just wanted to highlight some of what we heard from the previous efforts. We heard concerns about safety, as well as a need for visibility of bicyclists and pedestrians. We also heard concerns about walking on the corridor, particularly around sidewalks, as well as a need for traffic calming and really ensuring that the vehicles and the people driving those vehicles that are going down the road on East 12th are doing so at a safe speed for everyone using this street. And so now I wanted to talk also about something we heard in the previous processes. Again, a lot of concerns around some busy crossings in the area, and we are looking at ways through this project how we can improve those and make those safer and more comfortable, particularly for people walking and biking. So looking at how we can improve those difficult intersection crossings, as well as add to transit stop access and improve visibility for everyone using the roads at these intersections. And so now I'll transition to speaking about the different types of facilities that DOTI installs on streets in Denver. So DOTI, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, looks at data including vehicle volume, so the amount of vehicles on a street per day, as well as vehicle speed, so how fast those vehicles are traveling, to help us determine what the high comfort facility will be that will help to make it feel comfortable and safe to bike on the street. So on more local streets that have lower volumes and lower speeds, we look at facility types like the Neighborhood Bikeway, which is what we'll be talking about tonight. But just wanted to highlight that as speeds and volumes increase, then we do look at other facility types like a buffered or a protected bike lane. A neighborhood bikeway is not a separate lane for bicycles, but rather a shared condition and design elements that, that help us ensure that vehicle volumes and speeds are kept low. So I'll talk about that a bit on the next slide, but just wanted to note quickly here, you can see the orange star. That is where East 12th Avenue, falls in terms of volumes and speeds. And that is why we are considering a neighborhood bikeway for this corridor. So a neighborhood bikeway, again, the foundational and primary goal of any facility and improvement that we put on our streets are to improve safety for all road users. So that is no different with neighborhood bikeways. A neighborhood bikeway creates a slow, shared street for people walking, biking, and driving, and helps to increase visibility for all modes. It also implements designs that lower speeds and help to ensure that vehicle trips on the corridor are remaining local. And we also are able to largely maintain parking throughout the corridor on neighborhood bikeways, with some small exceptions at intersections if we have to pull parking back to improve visibility at those crossings. You can see in this picture here, this is an example of a shared street / neighborhood bikeway on Bayard, a little bit west of here in Denver. But this is a good example of what some improvements will begin to look like with the paint and post improvements at intersections primarily to help ensure that speeds remain low and trips are local on these streets. And finally, I just want to highlight a few more design elements of a neighborhood bikeway. So all neighborhood bikeways have designs that help to really show the way and make travel easy on those corridors. So that includes wayfinding signage, as well as pavement markings to really denote that this is a shared condition for people biking and driving on the road. As needed based on speeds and volumes, we look at design elements that help to slow speeds, like curb extensions, or sometimes they're called curb bump outs. You can see that in the top middle picture, where we extend the space at the curb to improve visibility and decrease the crossing distance for people walking and biking. We also look at designs to slow speeds like traffic circles, as you can see in the bottom middle picture. As volumes increase, we look at ways to prioritize local trips and potentially divert regional trips. So we look at diverters as well as crossing improvements to help make it a safe crossing for everyone involved. And so with that, I think I will hand it off to Vanita to kick off our first Q&A session. Vanita?
Thank you, Ellen. So I'm going to be honest, I need you guys to come up with some questions. We're here because we want to make sure you understand what the project is, to answer any questions that you may have directly to the project team who are here tonight to make sure we address your concerns. So please, please do use this as an opportunity to answer any questions that you may have. I'm actually going to start off the questioning with a question that we've heard before to get us started. And so, Ellen, if you could tell us, how does a neighborhood bikeway enhance safety for bicyclists and pedestrians?
Thanks, Vanita. Yeah, that's a great question. So studies have shown that by reducing speed, as well as the instances of potential conflicts, so by keeping speeds low and keeping vehicle trips on the corridor local, that helps to increase the safety for everyone involved and prioritize a slow shared street on these neighborhood bikeway corridors. And just wanted to know, I see someone has their hand up. We are taking questions through the chat. So if you have a question, please write your question in the chat and we'll be happy to answer it there.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Could you also tell us what is the difference between a neighborhood bikeway and a protected bikeway?
Yeah, great question. So a protected bikeway has a separate space and lane, if you will, with a buffer as well as a vertical element that really separates where bikes function on the street compared to travel lanes for vehicles. A neighborhood bikeway is a shared condition, so it's really focusing on how can we lower those speeds, keep trips local, and prioritize that space to feel safe as a shared, comfortable condition.
And then we do have a question from Brian. Brian, thank you so much for your question tonight. And his question is, how will intersections be prioritized, such as Colorado Boulevard and Quebec?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Bryce, did you want to take a stab at this question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so as you pointed out, at those major intersections are where we do see a lot of, pedestrian and bicycle crashes. So we will be prioritizing those just with typical treatments that you might see, like curb extensions, just trying to slow speeds and, make the intersection just feel a little bit more friendly for all modes of transportation.
Thank you so much, Bryce. We've got Adam.
Sorry, if I can just...
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, if I can just add on to that, Vanita. I was quick to toss it to my colleague in design, Bryce, to speak to some of those efforts, but again, just want to highlight, we're at very early stages of this process and are just developing a concept. So we don't know exactly what will happen at each intersection. We will be coming back to the public to speak to that after we incorporate feedback from this round and have more refined designs for those intersections. But as Bryce mentioned, this project is looking at how we can improve those intersections, but we unfortunately don't have scope to do full intersection rebuilds. So we will be looking at tools like paint and post materials, curb extensions, signal retiming to help give additional time for crossings, things like that at those intersections.
Thank you so much, Ellen and Bryce. We've got a question from Dan, and this is to you, Bryce. He says, my main problem with 12th Avenue, other than the dangerous crossings at Colorado Boulevard, is with visibility at the intersections. Will the intersections be daylighted to improve visibility and safety?
Yeah, short answer is yes. We will be daylighting essentially all intersections.
Excellent. Thank you, Bryce. I'm going to take one more from Sarah, and I'm going to give this to Dana. Can you improve the looks of these bikeways? The markings and curb extensions, etc., are really unattractive. The plastic posts look temporary. If we are going to do this, let's make it look permanent and do it well. Dana?
Yeah, hi, Sarah. Thanks for that comment. I have heard that before, that the materials that we're using for our bikeways look as if they're temporary. And I certainly understand that feedback. At the moment, as we're installing a lot of these and working to achieve the 125 miles of new bikeway goal to help achieve sort of those safety and mobility goals that we want to, we are starting off with those kinds of materials. And that's simply because they are more cost effective for us and we can install them quite quickly. It is possible in the future that we might switch out some of these materials to more sort of permanent or concrete type materials as we get more in the road and we've confirmed that all of them are working properly. But for now, we are going to stick with those temporary materials and we will do our best to make sure that they stay clean and in good condition.
Thank you, Dana. I did want to circle back to Bryce. Brian wanted you to quickly please explain what daylighting means.
Yeah, sorry for that, for not doing that initially. So basically what that means is bringing parking back at the intersection so that when the side street vehicle is pulling up to the stop sign, their sight triangle for oncoming traffic is not being inhibited by a parked vehicle.
Thank you, Bryce. I actually see that we have some more time for some questions, so let me squeeze in a little bit more. I'm looking at Adam. This question's for you, Ellen. On the eastern part, there's always a good bike lane along 11th from Quebec to Aurora. Why not merge these, dropping the bikeway to 11th or somewhere between Monaco and Quebec?
Yeah, thanks, Vinita, and thanks, Adam, for the question. That's a good one. So we have looked both through the feasibility study as well as hearing from the community that there is a strong preference for priority on 12th Avenue. And we are working at how we can plug into the existing facilities that are already within the network. But we have found, and studies have shown, as much as possible to have a straight direct route within the network, and 12th Avenue providing such a long straight east-west connection is helpful from a connectivity standpoint, as well as just predictability. It's easier to plan a trip when you can predict that the route will be on 12th Avenue throughout. That does not mean that we are moving away from the existing facilities on 11th, as you mentioned. We will look at ways that we can plug into those, but that's part of the reasoning for looking at East 12th Avenue as a corridor in full.
Thank you so much, Ellen, Bryce, and Dana. Great job. I want to encourage everyone, if you do have a question, please do put it in the chat box so that we can be prepared to answer it in our next Q&A. We have one more Q&A session later, and then we've got a poll question for you too, so you can participate directly through that. But for now, let's hand it back over to Bryce. I think you're going to walk us through some existing conditions.
Yeah, thank you, Vanita. So yeah, if you just want to go to the next slide there. No, you're good. You're good.
Other stuff up.
So yeah, basically, just some quick, what we're seeing. We have 7 bicycle crashes and 6 pedestrian crashes from 2015 to 2020. And those are 2 things that we're trying to improve as a part of this project. Just making it a multimodal project and not just like a bike facility. And then some of the concerns that we see in 311 are pedestrian and signage related, and we are definitely going to try to incorporate some of those improvements to this project as well. So on the next slide, we've got the ADT, so average daily traffic and speed. So from Madison to Colorado, we are looking at 23 miles per hour, 85th percentile speeds, and 2055 ADT. So if you remember back to Ellen's bikeway facility selection chart, those numbers are kind of right on the verge of bike lane and neighborhood bikeway. So this is an example of us using like data to determine which facility we want to do. So the parking occupancy is 50 to 100% here. So that's why we use that. And then Colorado to Syracuse and Syracuse to Yosemite, continuing with the neighborhood bikeway with the ADT and speeds. And then I think Ellen is next.
Yes, thanks, Bryce. I'll take it from here. So as Bryce mentioned, with the data that we collect, that helps us to understand what facility type should be proposed on a corridor, but also if there are areas that we need to look at, are there higher vehicle volumes or speeds in certain areas of the corridor that then we can create designs through this project to help bring it to our design speed and volume to ensure that this is a comfortable facility for everyone. And data is just one input that we consider as part of these projects. We also look at public feedback. So we have meetings like this one, as well as we currently have a survey open asking for public feedback about places where we should have a stronger focus as part of this project, and if there are any concerns throughout the corridor. So currently what we're seeing in terms of themes from the survey that is out right now, it will be open through April 2nd. We're seeing a lot of people with concerns about needing safer crossings along the corridor, general support for the idea of a prioritized street for people biking, as well as safety improvements for all modes along East 12th Avenue. We see that most people who go along 12th Avenue currently do so to shop and or recreate, as well as a lot of people who regularly bike and walk on the corridor and are interested in seeing safety improvements. So if you'll remember from the slide earlier, as we talked about themes that we heard from previous outreach, this does align with that feedback. And again, we're bringing this feedback as well as building upon what we heard in previous efforts to have a holistic understanding of how this project can improve this corridor. So I'll quickly talk about our anticipated schedule and program milestones for this project before walking through how to find additional information in this survey, and then we'll break for our last Q&A. So as I mentioned earlier, in 2015, there was a neighborhood bikeway feasibility study done for this corridor. As part of that process, there was stakeholder and public engagement. It was also confirmed the corridor of East 12th Avenue as a bicycle priority street in the East and East Central area plans. There was public and stakeholder engagement as part of that as well. And now we are in the process where we are beginning to develop a concept. So that involves council briefings, stakeholder engagement, public engagement like this. And as we develop that concept, we'll then come back out to the public to review the design as well as the survey results and feedback. From there, we will finalize the design, and we anticipate construction to begin as early as 2022 for this project currently. And so with that, just want to highlight how you can find information about this project. All of the information about these bond projects can be found at the website bit.ly/Denver Moves Backbones. From there, you'll see some overview information about bond projects that are seen as critical connections in the network and therefore branded as backbone projects. Once you're on that page, the next step will be to scroll down. So on the next slide, we'll show there is a header that says ongoing project details. And then from there, the third step, you can scroll down to see East 12th Avenue from Madison Street to Yosemite. And at that location, and thank you, Dana, for dropping the link into the chat right now. From here, you'll find any project updates, opportunities to participate in public meetings like this one, as well as the survey we currently have open. And I encourage you all to take that survey, share it with your friends and neighbors. That will be open through April 2nd. And that feedback feeds directly into our concept development stage and really helps us to refine the proposed designs for this street. And so from there, I just wanted to highlight a survey question and potentially talk through some of the answers here in our Q&A that's upcoming. So I will be launching a poll here shortly where you all can answer this question. What is your top concern related to safety and mobility through East 12th Ave today? So you can respond with traffic, speeding, crossing the street as a pedestrian or a bicyclist, traveling safely on a bicycle, being seen or visibility issues, parking, or business access. So it looks like we've got a few folks who have voted. We'll wait just a couple more minutes here as more answers roll in, and then we'll share the results, talk about that a bit, and then break for our second and longest Q&A of the night. So we'll just give folks a couple more minutes here. It looks like we're sitting at about 70% of folks have voted. So if you've stepped away from your computer, got a couple more seconds here to vote. All right, so it looks like we've got most people having voted here. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and we'll share the results with everyone. You should be able to see what we've heard from the group attending this meeting tonight is that traveling safely on a bicycle is the largest concern, with some concerns as well about crossing the street, being seen, having some visibility issues, as well as speeding concerns and just general traffic concerns as well. So with that, I will hand it off to Vanita to moderate our second and final Q&A session.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Ellen. This again is your opportunity to ask the project team questions that you have on your mind about the project. Please don't let this opportunity skip past you. They're here and they really want to hear from you. And I want to thank Teresa for asking her question for Ellen. And Teresa says, can you speak to timelines for implementation, how construction might impact neighbors, and how long it takes to make improvements? And she says, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the question. So as I said, we're right now anticipating developing the concept and finalizing the design throughout this year, 2021. And we anticipate construction could begin as early as 2022. In terms of installation timelines, one of the benefits of using materials like paint and post is that we're largely able to install them pretty quickly. So there are very minimal impacts in terms of construction. I will lean on Bryce if you have a more finite window of what that time frame is expected to be, but with the installation of improvements on Bayard Avenue that happened earlier this year in January, those improvements were phased and largely installed, I would say, in the window of about a week. But Bryce, I'll lean to you if you have more detail there on construction.
Yeah, that's you pretty much answered it spot on. I would say that this is quite the stretch with many improvements at intersections. So I might add a week or two to that week that Ellen had originally given out. And then in terms of when in 2022 this could be implemented, we are still trying to figure that out. That's a ways away to coordinate with our operations teams. So, but we will definitely keep you informed as we learn more about that.
It's worth noting we do what we can to coordinate and phase install so that while the total window might be 3 weeks, we really try to minimize our impact at each individual location along the corridor and do what we can there. But as Bryce mentioned, more details to come as we have them and the process continues.
Excellent. Thank you, Ellen. We've got a question from John. I'm going to send back to you, Ellen. And he says, what actions are being planned to calm traffic and reduce the design speed, especially since the current 85% speed is around 25 miles per hour?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. So again, we're in very initial stages of pulling together a concept. So we don't necessarily have specifics just yet. We're really leaning on data analysis and this public feedback to help with that development. But some examples of some designs that we do use to help mitigate speeds on neighborhood bikeways like East 12th Avenue is looking at curb extensions. So how we can bump out at the curb to both slow turning movements on the street as well as narrow the roadway for folks traveling along East 12th. We also can look at traffic circles which have shown to help reduce the speed throughout the corridor. And we're also in certain locations in the community networks piloting some new design elements like speed humps. We don't know that we'll be able to use those in this corridor, but it is something that we're piloting and thinking about citywide. So that could also be a potential opportunity to consider.
You know, there's a follow-up question to John's question around speed. And Brad wants to know if we are going to be moving, if East 12th Avenue is going to be moving to 20 miles per hour, in what stage would that be implemented? So are there discussions about reducing the speed? And if so, when would that be implemented?
Yeah, I can chime in here. So yeah, we design neighborhood bikeways at 20 miles per hour, and we do that by implementing traffic calming, which Ellen just alluded on. So we don't actually use like speed limit signs to try to reduce speeds. They're proven ineffective. If the road feels like people can drive fast, they will. So we try to reduce that speed in other ways with our traffic calming elements.
And it's worth noting, we have heard this question a lot about signage. I think it's something that we're always open to considering, but as Bryce mentioned, we're really focused on how we can design the street to make it feel less comfortable to go faster as someone driving a vehicle, and really increase visibility and put in those safety improvements on the ground. There is currently a feasibility study happening citywide about potential for lowering speed limits in select areas. So we're keeping an eye on that. But again, as Bryce said, we really focus on what we can do from a design perspective to help ensure people are moving slower on the street.
Yeah, this is a hot topic because we've got Matthew and Dan that want to ask Bryce about, is there any way to prevent people from blowing through stop signs? Is there anything that this project?
Yeah, so some of the things that we do are, one, just make sure the stop sign is visible. Make sure stop bars are visible. And if that still doesn't seem to be enough, there is an opportunity to put beacons on the stop sign. However, we would need to, we wouldn't do that initially. We would implement our project first and see how, give it some time to see how it operates before doing something like that.
Thank you, Bryce. We've got Brad. Bryce, I'm coming back to you. He wanted you to give some more information about how lowering speed limits. He says, can you share the evidence you cite about lowering speed limits, not changing speeds?
Yeah, we can definitely share that, share some studies and follow up with you on that. Right now, it's nationally best practice amongst engineers for that, but I can definitely follow up with some like actual studies and documentation.
Yeah, we could probably put that on our website so everybody can benefit from that knowledge.
Yeah.
So Brad will work to get that on the website for you to check out. Another question, for all bikeways, it would be awesome if cross streets had a stop, if not a four-way stop already, especially at hills, so bikes aren't forced to stop to cross traffic. And so Brian, just wanted to get your thoughts about that.
Vinita, would you mind just repeating that question?
Sure, it's question 14. For all bikeways, it would be awesome if cross streets had a stop, if not a four-way stop already, especially at hills.
Gotcha. Yeah. So one thing that we want to do with neighborhood bikeways is make it so that the bicycle movement does not stop. So where possible, we actually are flipping stop signs. We want to flip stop signs to favor the movement along 12th Ave, just so that bicycles aren't having to negotiate as many stop signs.
Excellent. Thank you, Bryce. Ellen, Dan has a question about, he'd love to see raised crosswalks to further help with feeling uncomfortable in intersections and crossings. Is this something that the project could include, raised crosswalks?
So yeah, we are piloting raised crosswalks as a part of the same study that Alan talked about with speed cushions. So our pilot location that we've selected is actually on Franklin Street. So we will give that 2 years to marinate and see how it operates before considering that on any other project.
Thank you, Bryce.
Worth noting, something that we're looking at, and it's exciting to have the pilot opportunity that's further than we've gotten before in terms of thinking of these as tools in our toolkit. So we will keep an eye on that, but do just want to note, I think, Dan, to your question, part of the benefit of or a potential benefit of a raised crosswalk is increased visibility. And that's something that we look at with current tools in our toolbox, like curb extensions and bump outs, to really help improve the visibility at the intersection, as well as carve out some space for pedestrians so that they're crossing fewer feet of travel lanes, as well as improving the visibility so that everyone can see each other a little bit easier at that crossing. We can also, particularly at some of the busier crossings, I know 12th Avenue navigates several of those in this area of town. We look at how we can get creative with the tools that we have, one of those being signal timing, and how we can potentially change that so that it can better prioritize people who are crossing on foot or on bike and ensure that they have enough time and that there is that visibility as well as queuing space for them to help make those crossings feel safer.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm going to come to Dana for question 8. And the question's from Brian. Are we connecting with Aurora at all? And I know you've read, it's a very long question that Brian has, so I think you've read his question completely, but the essential part of the question is, how are we connecting to Aurora at all? He says, because Del Mar could use better protection too, as well as the crossing at Yosemite. I actually almost got hit, on my last trip. So how do we connect with Aurora is what Brian said. I'm glad you're okay, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for that comment, Brian. I saw several other folks asking similar questions in the chat about connectivity to Aurora. So Aurora does have their own sort of bicycle network plan, just as we do. So existing network and planned future network. We do coordinate with those Aurora planning staff relatively frequently. As far as I know, there isn't a plan to have a direct connection like in the very near future here. But one thing I know that we can do is work with them to get wayfinding signages so that when you get to the end of the city, at least we're directing bicyclists to the safest route as they move through Aurora. We've done that before where we make sure that wayfinding is there sort of at the end of our city. And then often we are able to coordinate with them to continue that wayfinding until the bicyclists get to like the nearest safest route to continue moving in that direction. So that's probably the direction we'll go at this point. But we will continue to work with Aurora to make sure all our network connects as much as possible across cities.
Thank you. We are closing up on our time for Q&A, so please do put your question into the chat box so we can address it before the evening is over. I've got a question from Dan for Bryce. He says, could the project team address the concern about Hudson and Grape intersection? My problem, he says, that's my problem intersection with drivers blowing stop signs. So Hudson and Grape. Right.
Yeah, so I guess one other thing I can add to the discussion about making stop signs more visible and making sure stop bars are visible is enforcement. So if we notice that drivers know that they should be stopping but they're just not, we do work with our enforcement team to patrol different areas more frequently. So if people start getting tickets there, that can be one way to help as well.
Thank you, Bryce. And then I'm going to ask one last question before we move on to Ellen, which has been one of the questions we hear often. Is parking going to be impacted for this corridor?
Yeah, thanks, Vanita. It's a good question. And as part of neighborhood bikeways, because they are a shared condition and the design elements are primarily at intersections to help limit through traffic as well as lower speeds of the trips that remain on the street, parking generally is not affected and able to be maintained throughout the corridor, with slight exceptions at intersections. As Bryce mentioned earlier, the concept of daylighting, which is where we pull back parking, maybe 1 or 2 spots at the intersection to improve sight lines and visibility. Those are the types of parking impacts that can sometimes be expected as part of any safety improvement, neighborhood bikeways included, but largely throughout the corridor and mid-block, we anticipate that parking will not be affected as part of neighborhood bikeway installations.
Excellent. So we are going to continue with Ellen, continue the presentation. Please, if you do have any last questions, put them in the chat box. And before we say goodnight, we'll revisit another Q&A. For now, we've answered everyone's questions that has been in the chat box. But if you've got one hiding in your back pocket, bring it out and we'll stop to answer it before we end the evening. So I'm going to hand it back over to Ellen. Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks, Vanita. And
let me move forward.
You
there you go.
Again, thank you all for making time tonight and to learn about the project and share your feedback. This is really helpful to us in the process, as again, we look at both data analysis as well as stakeholder and public feedback to help us as we develop the concept design to make sure that we get it right and we're focusing in the right areas. So how you can stay engaged with this project, we currently have a survey open with questions about where we should focus and what concerns are along the corridor. Again, that is very helpful because it can be incorporated into our work as we pull together the concept design. You can find that concept survey at our website, as I discussed earlier. That's at bit.ly/Denver Moves Backbones. From there, you'll be able to find updated project information as well as the link to this survey. We also have office hours available with the project team. So if you have additional questions or want to dive deep about a concern on the project or just want to get more information, you can RSVP to meet with members of the project team. Again, that's at our website, bit.ly/Denver Moves Backbones. You can also join our stakeholder email list or email us a question if we weren't able to get to it tonight at bikes@denvergov.org. And we just ask that you include East 12th Avenue as the subject of the email because we have several projects going on at this time, which is very exciting, but it helps keep us organized. So with that, I'll hand it back to Vanita if there are opportunities for us to answer any more questions. Otherwise, really appreciate everyone making time tonight. Thank you for learning about the project, and please continue to stay involved as we move forward in the process. We will be scheduling another public meeting. We're currently targeting early summer, so looking at May. We will be sending out updates through our email listserv on the website, as well as coordinating with council offices once that date is set. So we hope to see you in the future as well. So Vanita, I'll hand it off.
Yes, well, I really hope that you found tonight's presentation informative and that it answered your questions. It looks like we don't have any other questions in the chat box. So thank you so very much for participating. Please do invite your neighbors and friends to join us for our next virtual open house. But for tonight, have a safe night, take care, and enjoy your dinner. We'll talk with you guys later. Bye-bye.